Let's talk about
politics, environmental science,
global warming,
constitutional rights,
social and economic challenges,
money, power, choice.
Nature does not compromise.
extreme droughts, extreme heat waves.
Sea levels are rising, and it is
about climate change.
This is the future of the next generations.
Perfect. So again, my name is Tony Passano, and I am a fellow with Change Chamber Lobby for Climate. And so we're a nonpartisan coalition of over 100 student groups for young adults and other allied organizations. Within our campaigns, we educate for science-based climate action within the chambers of Congress, but also trade associations like the Chambers of Commerce. So it's kind of a play on words with the chambers there. And we also work with corporate agencies and local communities. We pursue meaningful change towards an equitable, sustainable future, and we empower others to do the same. I think based on the conversation we're going to be having today on green jobs, it's actually really interesting. You know, I'll give this little personal anecdote about myself. For a long time, I wanted to figure out how to have an impact and do something with sustainability. And I think for a lot of people, I've heard this from other people too, is that it can be really difficult to step into that space when you maybe don't have the background, or you maybe just you don't have the mentorship, or you don't know where to go. And Change the Chamber was really that opportunity for me to step into that space. And I think it's kind of a piece of advice I would give to anyone, is that if you to go to, work toward working in a green career, take the next step. Look for opportunities, they're paid or unpaid, and reach out and ask someone to have a conversation. There's lots of different communities on LinkedIn or in different spaces. And I know all of us here at Change the Chamber, we're always happy to talk about what it's like to be a national climate fellow, opportunity to get more involved, gain experience too, which is very important. So yeah, CTC has conducted over 80 educational meetings with US senators and representatives. We also released our How to Become an Environmental Changemaker training course recently, which I believe Evie will put in the chat. That is a really great training, which really is, again, a good introduction into being an environmental changemaker. And then it was based on a previous toolkit actually that we developed and got a lot of great attention. And we'll actually be publishing, this is separate, but an updated report on the US Chamber of Commerce later this year. This is something that we've put out historically in the past, just kind of, doing our research on the Chamber of Commerce, how they work, and then keeping folks up to date on them. And then beyond Change the Chamber, this event is also sort of like co-sponsored by Climate Action Campaign. They're one of our close partners and collaborators, and they're a vibrant coalition of over a dozen major national environmental justice, and public health groups. Its goal is to reduce climate pollution and accelerate the transition to clean energy and the sustainable society in ways that support justice, jobs, improved health, and quality of life for all. Its top priority is achieving durable and ambitious federal climate action. And so with that, I want to welcome you all, and I want to provide some space for you all to share a little bit about yourselves. So if you don't mind, we'd love for you to share your name, your location, and your occupation in the chat. And I'm just going to write a quick little note on that, so that in the chat. So yes, but I'll sort of model this. My name's Tony Passano. I'm based out of Boston, Massachusetts, and I am a climate fellow and a student at UMass Boston. So if you want to just type that into the chat, and then as we move into the next section, we can go in and read and see where everyone is from, because I know we had a lot of people register for this event from a lot of different areas as well. So it's definitely exciting to see you all here. Oh, hi, Claudia NYC, recent NYU grad. Alana from Texas. Ooh, Bloomington, Indiana. Nice. I'm from Indiana, fun fact. Bloomington's a pretty city. Gamal, hi again, Gamal. And yeah, I guess I can pass it over to Evie. And as you know, as Evie goes on, we'll see some of these other folks dropping their names in the chat. But again, thank you all so much for being here today. It's great to see you all. And I'm really excited for the conversation we're going to be having today.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Evie Mangelko. I'm also with Change the Chamber. I just wanted to give a brief introduction to the Inflation Reduction Act. We have a lot to share today, but this is kind of a big piece of the puzzle. So Inflation Reduction Act was passed in August of 2022, is the largest federal climate bill yet, and it's a big investment in growing the green economy in the US. So it's not perfect, and it doesn't meet all of our climate goals, but it's a start and a major climate win. So one big success is that it's created a significant number of green jobs. In August of last year, the Biden administration announced the Inflation Reduction Act had created 170,000 green jobs to date. And also by July, Climate Power announced that over 270 new clean energy projects had been implemented nationwide, which amounts to $278 billion in new investments. This law is also projected to create more than 1.5 million additional jobs over the next decade. And it's also created the American Climate Corps, which give over 20,000 young adults work experience, training, and a start in good paying careers in conservation, clean energy, community climate adaptation, environmental justice, and energy efficiency. So, like I said, this is just a start. More climate legislation is needed, and then people to fill those green jobs that are created to implement the investments that legislation creates are crucial. And there's a lot going on across the US and in many other parts of the world, from the local to state and national levels, to fill and create the green jobs. That legislation is just one part that's needed. So I'm happy to share our panelists today. They all have experience and knowledge to share in growing the green economy, and I'm happy that they're all here to share their expertise. So I'll pass it back to Tony.
Thank you so much, Evie. Yeah, the IRA is really important and has been something that we've learned about, talked about a lot over the past year, and is definitely relevant to the conversation today. Speaking of the conversation today, the way this is going to work for folks who are out there in the Zoom world is we're going to have 4 presentations by our 4 panelists. They're going to last around 5 to 10 minutes apiece, and then we're going to break out into a discussion where we're going to be asking, or I'm going to be asking, I don't know, Evie, if you want to ask some questions too, you're welcome to. But I'm going to be asking some questions to our panelists, and just whoever is happy to answer can just jump in, and then we'll just kind of spend some time there before closing with a Q&A if we have time. And we're actually going to be starting with our presenter, ROWE. And Deb, I'll let you introduce yourself because I think you do it best. Deb, you're muted.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Evie, and hi, everybody. And my internet's acting wonky, so I am actually connected to my phone hotspot. Let me know if it's not working well, and I'll make another attempt. So hi, I'm president of the U.S. Partnership for Education for Sustainable Development, and really glad to be here with Change the Chamber and all of the other speakers and co-sponsors and all of you who are attending and all of you listening to the recording. I know that the area of green jobs is a struggle for many people, that you want to have that green and sustainability career, and it hasn't happened yet. So I'm really excited to share a bunch of information. I'm going to get right into it, okay? So I have been helping people with getting green careers and sustainability careers for, I think I'm on year 48 now. I was a professor of renewable energy technology and energy management that morphed into sustainable development for 42 years and helped colleges and universities across the country and then globally start their sustainability programs. And in the U.S. partnership, we have sector teams in the area of higher ed, youth, which is where Change the Chamber was kind of born. And then we also have K-12 and business and community sectors, interfaith sectors, etc. So I'm not going to go through all of that. You can look up U.S. partnership. I just came back from Costa Rica recently, so luckily my slides are in English. This is a common definition of what sustainable development is. It's about meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. But it's also about raising quality of life for all. So another way of thinking about sustainable development, it's our shared responsibility. I like to say opportunity for improving quality of life for all, economically, socially, and environmentally, now and for future generations. My favorite definition of sustainable development is that it's about loving people beyond your family and friends. Because if you have an open heart and you care, you are a caring and compassionate person beyond family and friends, you will naturally live in a more sustainable way. Okay, so here are the Sustainable Development Goals. I encourage you to explore them. They're interrelated. It's very exciting to see the progress that's happening, as well as the opportunities for more progress. You just look up Sustainable Development Goals, you'll get there. Why is it so important? Well, we all know that our decisions are going to create more scarcity and human suffering, or a future of greater abundance, better relationships, which is the number one indicator of happiness in life, by the way, the quality of your personal relationships, and higher quality of life. I just want to check in. Did you guys get to hear the piece about how sustainability is about loving people beyond family and friends? Want to make sure you heard that. Okay, so here's probably the most important slide of everything I'm going to show you. How to get a green job and career. Well, you could do number one, which is apply for existing jobs that are posted. You could do that, but a lot of people are doing that. And many of them have the degrees, some of them have the experience, and it's competitive out there now, because once you study what's going on in the world, a lot of people want to be in green jobs and in sustainable jobs. So the second thing you could do is be an entrepreneur and start a new organization or a division of an existing organization that's around sustainability. But I think you really need to be realistic, because a lot of you need to go work for somebody else and learn how to run things first before you attempt your own, if you want to have a higher rate of success. But you can also be at a company, like let's say that you're in heating and cooling. You're working at a heating and cooling company. They have not yet opened up an energy efficiency division of their company, and you could do that for them. That might be more useful than trying to start from scratch. But the third, which is my favorite, is you can take any job and turn it into a green job. So I'm just going to quickly share some stories about that. At Emory University, there was one person on staff there who really wanted the university to do more with green and sustainability. So what she did was sent out an email and put up some posters that said, if you are concerned about the environment and about inclusion and about equity, please join us. We're going to have a Friday brown bag lunch. Everybody's welcome to join. It doesn't matter what level or position you're in. And then she had the group come together and said, what are you worried about? And what do you think we might be able to do about it on this campus? And that turned into the whole sustainability initiative at Emory, which is extensive. Wherever you are, you could use that kind of process in a job. And if your bosses say, hey, we don't do the sustainability stuff here, show them examples of how when you do it, you can save the company money and resources and reduce their pollution and improve their reputation. Whatever it is you think your bosses are going to care about. And that oftentimes gets past the barriers. Once you do that a little bit as kind of a extracurricular volunteer at work, you become known as the go-to person for greener sustainability. And that oftentimes builds into a job. One of my students was a manager at a Kentucky Fried Chicken, and he learned how to do an energy audit in one of my classes. He did an energy audit on the Kentucky Fried Chicken where he was manager. He saved them so much money that they made him the national energy manager. I've also seen people who will go into companies and say, look, just pay me half of what I save you on your utility bills. Or just pay me what you think I deserve after improving your reputation. And they've been able to build themselves into, really well-paying jobs that way. Accomplish some visible early wins, and then suggest, hey, if I just had part of my job was working on this, and then it builds into a full-time job. Oftentimes that's successful. So I have a lot more information on that. I have put together, oh, what just happened here? I put together, this is actually one of the resources. It's got dozens of websites. But also look at, here's all the resources that I'm going to be putting into the chat. So co-authored a global guidance document for the United Nations Environment Program on Education and Actions for Green Jobs. That's a great document. We have an article on green and sustainability jobs. That's where that spreadsheet I just showed you comes out of. And there's also discussion in there about the 3 ways to get a green job. Number 3 is that list of 5 dozen resources. We helped to co-organize out of the U.S. partnership, the National Clean Energy Workforce Alliance. And so if you've never been to any of the events there, they're all free. You can sign up. We worked internationally with the clean energy ministers. We have a toolkit on how you can convene people, all the stakeholders in your community, regardless of whether you have an official position or not. You can convene them and help them to think about the workforce development we need. And then you become known as a local expert. And as Tony just mentioned, we have at Change the Chamber how to be an environmental change maker with free education materials that you can use. And also if you take the course, you get a certificate and become part of a family of people who are around the world who are working on this very important topic. So just a couple of other things and then I'll be done. Look, we want to be able to be environmentally, socially, and economically responsible in our roles as just a person, in our career, in our communities, and in the government, and how we interact with the government. So that's the key outcome that we want for ourselves and for others. I'm not going to take the time to go through this, but this is how you can work with if you're on a campus or in a community or just with the whole planet, using whichever group you're working with as a living lab for sustainable development, working with all the academic areas and all the stakeholders, and the toolkit I referred to talks more about that. One of the things you want to do is get people off of doom and gloom, off of anxiety or depression around the future. And one of the ways we do that is with the 4 Ps. This is what I just did in a region of Costa Rica, where you think about all the positive possibilities. You acknowledge what'll happen if you don't make change, and then you create a preferred vision. What do we want for our future? And then you put together work groups. And this is just a taste of the change agent skills that we teach in our certificate course. Once again, it's free. And the link will go into the chat. You want to understand the power dynamics, understand the system change possibilities, find your leverage points to create societal change or organizational change, not just individual change, and then prioritize your projects by impact. Build coalitions of support and learn how to manage your own emotional climate and also the emotional climate of your meetings. Make them fun to go to, celebrate each step. Learn the self-care. Here's a great slide on how to prevent burnout as you work on this. So we do have a special emphasis that we're working on, a national campaign on why electrification decarbonization is so important, and the importance of making your buildings energy efficient, and of using heat pumps, electrifying your buildings so that we can get renewables on the grid or renewables right on your house. And I don't have time to go through this, but you'll see it. It's in the recording, and then you can stop the recording and you can read it. But those are some of the many reasons why we want to electrify buildings and decarbonize them. So you have the power. We can choose a more sustainable future. And I will put all those links into the chat. And thank you for the time, and sorry for the disruptions. Back over to you, Evie and Tony.
Thank you so much, Deb. That was great to hear more about you in this space. You know, we hear a lot from you and your role as our mentor for fellows at Change the Chamber too. So you've been a huge resource for all of us, and I know a lot of the things that you shared are going to be resources for others as well. And so with that, we're actually going to transition to the next speaker just to keep us moving here, considering time. Dana, if you want to take the stage and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Tony. I'm Dana Claire Redden, the founder of Solar Stewards, and I have a little presentation for you today. I'm going to share my screen. Can you see that? Let's see. Oops. I'm going to do a little bit of a full screen mode. Boom. All right. How's that looking?
Looking great.
Great. Thank you. So this presentation is it's personal, but a lot of the questions that I get asked as an entrepreneur, a social entrepreneur in this space is, you know, how did I get started? And so I wanted to give a little perspective of that, and hopefully you'll find some of these anecdotes a little bit useful. Thank you for hosting Change the Chamber. I'm just excited about what you all do, and thank you to my fellow panelists. It's an honor to be sharing this time with you. And so I just want to start out with talking about our social enterprise. We're based in Atlanta, Georgia. I saw some Atlanta folks in the chat. We do work national and now international as of this year. So very excited for these milestones. And we connect corporate renewable energy procurement with opportunities in historically excluded communities. And I'll get into what that means. I'll try to go fairly quickly, but if you're watching this recording, you can just rewind for a recap. And so all of these organizations you see on the screen, we're a very active member of. We were a part of the first Justice 40 Accelerator program. We've won a couple American-made solar prizes by the Department of Energy. I'm on the board of SEIA Solar Energy Industries Association, a co-founder of BOSS, Black Owners of Solar Services, and onward. And I share this to say that you know, your network is so valuable in this work. So I understand that, you know, maybe some of you are putting in, you know, for interviews, but you know, if you invest that time in your network, that's where you're really going to find those returns for jobs and other opportunities. So a little bit about where I'm from. I'm from a environmental justice community, you could call it. I'm from a coal community. Now we've rebranded that to say energy community. From a distressed city. I'm from Johnstown, Pennsylvania. And a couple of years ago now, 2002, I was, well, last year actually, I was looking to, you know, do some hiking back home. I was going home. And I looked up Rager Mountain, the trail I didn't get to finish, my mom and I, during the pandemic. And wouldn't you know, I found that we were again in global news, my hometown, but always for the wrong reasons. And one of those wrong reasons was this methane leak and climate disaster. It really shapes your perspective being from environmental justice community in this work. You certainly don't have to. We're all exposed to climate change, but that has really influenced what's behind Solar Stewards' way of thinking. This is also my hometown, Johnstown. This was after the 1889 flood. It was actually, you know, would have been last week, May 31st, 1889. I know this because, you know, every field trip was to the Flood Museum, right? But when I was studying entrepreneurship, of course, a couple names came up, and one of them was Andrew Carnegie. That's his photo, selfie. You know, I guess he said this quote, interestingly enough, but, you know, as I was studying him, my mom said, you know, that was his dam, right? So this picture is from the breach of the Johnstown flood and the breach of the South Fork Dam, which flooded because of a lack of repairs and killed more than 2,000 people. You would call it criminal negligence today, because Andy and his wealthy friends had a country club and they just didn't prioritize maintaining it. And so I say this to say, we know Andrew Carnegie for other things, his philanthropy, his libraries, the university, perhaps, so Carnegie Mellon. But this really imparted on me the importance of making sure that when we do business, we do it right the first time. We can't go back and correct with philanthropy. We've got to do business in a more equitable and safe manner to begin with. So thank you, Andy, for that inspiration. And sorry that such a tragedy had to really inspire it. Back to my hometown again. I'm from the poorest town in Pennsylvania. This status from a couple years ago. I don't believe we've made any improvements here. But I say that to say, part of my upbringing is really taking those stigmas and using it in a way that you could consider it a strength. So my dad, as pictured in this picture, whooping some guy. He was a second-degree black belt in judo, and judo is a really cool martial art where you use an opponent's weight and energy against them. And so Solar Stewart seeks to use some of these stigmas and labels to really focus on communities, historically excluded communities, and marshal resources in their direction. So many of you may be thinking in your career, what I studied might not be what I want to do, or I found some other opportunity that I want to explore, and I want to emphasize that that's totally okay. My undergrad from Drexel University was actually in interior design, and I still love design. This was to date myself before LEED, which I hope that you all are familiar with, the U.S. Green Build Council and their LEED certification. This is before they had LEED commercial interiors. So quite a while ago, I got my LEED certification in 2008. But that really helped me to pivot to looking at sustainability for the entirety of the built environment. But really, in essence, design thinking applies to everything. So I've applied it to business systems. You can apply it to, obviously, products and services. But I encourage you to use, even community engagement, you can see kind of in this diagram. I encourage you to use design thinking and principles of design in your career path. And you can see it's circular. It's not necessarily linear. So don't be afraid to, go off on a different path. Nothing is necessarily set in stone. And as I think we heard DEBRA say, you can really create your own opportunities. So I mentioned that Solar Stewards is a social enterprise, different from philanthropy, again, more structural in its essence of using commercial means to deliver impact and equity, in addition to being a viable business. And I strongly believe in the frameworks of, some of them call them benefit corps or B corps, social enterprise, as what we need in business to really make those structural changes. And so again, I want to thank Change the Chamber, talking about Chamber of Commerce, because, we at Solar Stewards have chosen business as, one of our mediums of change. Speaking of change, our energy grid is changing, and I'm just so excited about, the opportunity to play a role in that, as I think many of those tuning in are as well. And one of those changes is from a centralized grid, a diagram you see on the left side here, to a distributed grid. I love this diagram also because of the fact that it doesn't distributed look like more equitable systems. I mean, I love diagrams. That's why I promised myself I'd never say STEAM or STEM anymore. You have to include the A, because we need arts to really get the message across. So we at Solar Stewards focus on distributed energy resources, or as you read on the screen, those localized opportunities for energy generation and storage. That's what DERs also include. And so, it gave me the opportunity to go from a career looking at the built environment to focusing on the energy that we could produce on site on or inside or beside the built environment. And Solar Stewards has a unique value proposition in incentivizing these distributed energy resources. You could call it rooftop solar. We do focus on all renewable energy, as I'll go into a little bit more. But that being said, we really want to focus on distributed energy resources. So how do we do any of what I'm saying at Solar Stewards? One thing you should know is whenever a corporation is buying renewable energy, they're buying renewable energy credits. Anytime you hear we're 100% renewable, they've done it through renewable energy credits, about whether they're generated on site or from the purchase of a REC that's off site of that company's real estate. And so we sought out to introduce a new framework, a more equitable way to reach projects that really aren't getting the support, whether that's because of lacking policy or lacking financial tools, whichever it is, to leverage the private sector's procurement of renewable energy through renewable energy credits to focus on certain projects in historically excluded communities. So those projects, they look like schools, they look like affordable housing, municipalities, and one of the best things about social RECs is 100% of those proceeds go to the community and the project. So we're taking an existing framework, tweaking it with some, social enterprise design thinking, and introducing new ways of systemic change. And as we heard Deborah talk about, the KFC example, you can do a lot with what you already have. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. And so, I'd like to impart that as well as part of what I'm sharing with you today. Also, 100% of those proceeds are then delegated and determined through a community benefit agreement. We strongly believe in community benefit agreements and administering, more equitable renewable energy projects, whether they're funded by the proceeds of social RECs or some other vehicle. It's very important to have the community's input on any type of impact. Only community can determine what success looks like for impact in their communities. And so again, and maybe you can scan this little QR code for our link tree. Social RECs pass 100% of those proceeds to community partners for community-determined social impact initiatives. I'm Dana Claire Redden, the founder of Solar Stewards. I've had a varied career. It's been very long, feels like, and that's why I'm so excited to share with you some of my journey and hopefully encourage you all to join us on this journey, because it's time to pass that baton. We heard a little bit about burnout. Burnout is real. And so if you go to our website, solarstewards.net, under team, you'll find opportunities for internships. We're always hosting interns, and we welcome the valuable contributions of the next generation in climate action. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Dana, for sharing a little bit about yourself and some advice for folks here in this meeting. I think it's really important that we share our stories, because when we share our stories with other people, we can see our sort of trajectories, and by seeing someone else's trajectory in the career that you've chosen in your life, someone else in this call might be inspired by that. So I appreciate you sharing that with us here. I'm going to pass it over to Gamal if you want to introduce yourself and lead with your presentation. We have about 20 minutes or 22 minutes until the end of this scheduled meeting. We may run over a little bit, but yeah, Gamal, I'll pass it over to you, and we can continue on here.
Great, thank you very much. My name is GAMAL SHERIF. I'm the mayor of a small town in Pennsylvania outside of Philadelphia called Rutledge. I do not have a presentation. I'm trying to get jiggy with the riffing on some of the important themes that I've heard, but I did take some notes. In terms of insights, for 2 years, I was not working, looking for work in climate planning. And I just found my way back into conservation science and youth education. So there was a tough time there. And what I've heard so far from the other speakers really does speak to me. I was a school teacher, and then I got into green schools, and then I got my LEED credential, and then I studied energy monitoring. And then I was elected mayor, and I came to the IRA, and I said, wow, there's so much here. So I wanted to share a few notes about that. In terms of the municipal framework, there are so many opportunities that I think for sure Gabriel is going to talk about as well. We have a climate action plan, and that requires people who are familiar with writing and communication and energy and solar and water and stormwater. There's so many careers associated with the municipal framework. We also have this interest in putting in rain gardens, not because they're pretty, because they are, but they can actually capture stormwater runoff that's going into your sewer system. Now, some municipalities in Pennsylvania have actually created municipal credits for sewer fees if you have a rain garden, and that's an example of distributed stewardship of transforming our culture. So why not just make the world more beautiful and save some resources? We also have a yard waste pickup. So we're pulling our yard waste out of the primary municipal waste stream, and we're mulching it and making mulch for gardens. We're also getting into composting. We did a trial run last year, and I was accumulating about 10 pounds of compost from my kitchen every week. And that ended up to be about 500 pounds for the year. That's a quarter ton. And if you look at the way that what it costs to capture your waste and then haul it and then dump it, we're actually saving a lot of mass, and we're also investing in regenerative practices. So the municipal framework is a good way to understand. If you want to explore that, you can see a lot there. In terms of strategies for your career, I would recommend that you think very carefully about how you feel. What is that dream job, and how does it make you feel? I thought it was going to be climate planning, but there's so many people who have so much experience, more than I do. So it didn't work for a long time, but then I came back to the feeling of wanting to be excited about working with people and teaching, because I'm essentially a school teacher with a background in science. One of the biggest challenges that you're going to run up against is supremacy culture, and its relatives like patriarchy, or even aspects of our economy that are wed to power. And what that does is it affects your self-narrative. So you've got to take care of yourself. And if you do that, you can take care of your family and your community and so forth. So the biggest threat is when we start down-talking ourselves. So when DEBRA speaks of love, self-love is a very important part of that. Everybody deserves effective working conditions. So please focus on the feeling. And I think that's probably where you'll get closer to the right job for you. I've been in interviews. I've had second and third callback interviews. Third time, and I don't get the job. I'm like, what? So I think maybe I could do a little bit more self-love, In terms of the growth, and this is the cultural transformation that we are hoping for and looking for, one of the things that we can do is to reclaim the narrative, reclaim the language, and speak to liberty and justice for all. Every 2 weeks, the Borough Council and the Mayor do the Pledge of Allegiance. And I love that phrase, liberty and justice for all. It gets me closer to this idea of people, planet, prosperity that are related to the SDGs. So I think that's a good gateway to what it is that is affecting equity? Do we have liberty and justice for all? Why in the world would we say that a secure home that is weatherized and energy efficient can only be accessible for people who are middle wealth or wealthier? And that gets us to the IRA. What a fantastic start. But I'm going to say right now that the IRA is a beginning, and we need to move more aggressively or more lovingly towards a Green New Deal. We have to move further beyond the IRA. There are some good elements to the IRA. The municipal provisions that have come up in the last year allow municipalities to get back some of their investments that they're putting into fleets or energy. I would say this, and there are incentives also for people to purchase electric passenger vehicles. And that is an equity issue because lower wealth people cannot access $40,000 minus the $7,500 towards a electric vehicle. And more importantly, pardon me, just as important is the idea that we need to have democratic, equitable transportation with communities that are walkable and rollable within 15 minutes, with schools and hospitals and services and gardens and parks and banks and everything else that we need. We have to design. If we're still designing for passenger vehicles through electric vehicles, we're not heading in the right direction. So, however, fleet management in the private sector and in the municipal sector is probably a good idea, whether it's buses or if your city has like 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 vehicles, those could be converted to electric. And it's nice to know that the IRA has those provisions. I'm going to close it up with a quick reference to something that was mentioned before about distributed energy. And this is the thing. I'm going to get more on the philosophical side. Within supremacy culture, what I've seen is that people are in the pursuit of power as opposed to the facilitation of energy. And what I mean by power in this sense is power over people, as opposed to being in an ecosystem where energy and ideas flow easily. So the engineering model of distributed energy has social implications as well. Let's all be stewards of energy flow so that the power can flow to more people as opposed to being concentrated or controlled. Those are my 30,000-foot recommendations. I wish you all the best of luck, and I'm looking forward to hearing what Gabriel has to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. I think with that, we'll just jump right over to Gabriel just to be considerate of time.
Okay, and I will try to go at a good speed. So thank you everybody for speaking before me. This has been an excellent I've learned a lot just from listening to you all, and I didn't anticipate speaking about kind of my background or what got me to this point, but I think it would be valuable for everyone that is attending to know. And you know, I received my degree in kind of a combination of economics, public policy, and ecology and environmental science. It's the Earth Systems degree from Stanford University, and I pursued that into a master's degree through a co-terminal program. And through that, I, was convinced that my calling was really to be an educator, an environmental educator that focused on ecosystem restorations. And that conclusion was reached because so much of the foundational work for our society to become sustainable happens within educational environments. And I can see the echoes of kind of what DEBRA and people like DEBRA have accomplished through the past decades in the development of the fields of sustainability in earth sciences and the ethics of, investing sustainably, things of that nature. Right. But I immediately, once I got out of school, I was like, I'm going to be an educator. I'm going to do ecosystem restorations. I moved to Phoenix, Arizona, and I got a job at the Desert Botanical Garden as a volunteer program specialist where I ran docent programming, and I was essentially kind of helping docents explain the exhibits at the museum that is the Botanical Garden in Phoenix. And I really enjoyed being able to do community outreach. I enjoyed being able to put together lesson plans. And I was, I was enjoying the work that I did, but the scale of the impact, scalability wasn't something that really hit me until I was in a position where I was like, what I'm doing right now is not scaling, right? And so that was something that propelled me to kind of pursue more, well, what is other things that I can get into through this, employment that I'm in? And something that I was doing is I was giving very specialized tours while at the Desert Botanical Garden regarding the facilities that we had to conserve plants that could not survive in the environment of Phoenix, right? All deserts are different throughout the earth. And so certain species really needed specific conditions to be able to survive. And I would show the public, here's, what we fundraise for. Here's, the resources that we have to protect these species that, are at a high risk of extinction. But what you learn is that those facilities are very similar to the larger facilities that operate in, hospitals, other large commercial buildings, multifamily buildings. It's all microcosms and macrocosms of similar concepts of maintaining an indoor environment, right? And recognizing kind of the energy needs of maintaining an indoor environment as a human being within a society that needs infrastructure, and kind of expanding that, right? And so when I saw this opportunity pop up at the City of Madison for a sustainability program specialist, I was very interested. I had grown up in the City of Madison. If you've ever been here, it's full of parks, green space. It's a very environmentally oriented community that is now kind of developing and growing into a city, right? And we're trying to do that growth in the right way, which is difficult. The incentives, I think that Mayor GAMAL was speaking about, and that might have also been spoken about by the previous panelists, for development in our society are not tilted toward sustainability. The incentives are always tilted toward rapid growth, and kind of abandon at that point, other than the preservation of wealth for certain other people. So when I came into the City of Madison, I immediately identified my position, within the context of the job description itself, which was residential energy efficiency and outreach to ensure residential energy efficiency and resilience for our community in the face of climate changes. People think that areas in the Midwest are not going to be vulnerable to the effects of climate change, and we're in fact very vulnerable. And I think people are starting to see that more and more as you see severe weather events, flooding, things of that nature. So within that context, I also identified that we don't have a lot of resources, right? We have a leader, right? We have a Mayor Satya Rhodes Conway, who's a leader in climate action, chair of climate mayors for a little bit. And she's led our community to be, a leader in climate action, but that leadership doesn't automatically create resources, right? And I think that's something that kind of gets lost within the context of government is, you vote, you participate in the political process, you get a leader that's kind of aligned with what you want, and then all of a sudden the change is slow, right? Even though the thrust is there for the change to happen quickly. And that's just because, there's so many resource constraints, policy constraints, legal constraints. Living in Wisconsin, we're dealing with a regulatory and legal environment that's not super conducive to the really progressive things that we want to do within the City of Madison. But within that context, right, you've identified barriers. There's not a lot of resources to do the extensive work that you want to do. The largest program that I run, the Efficiency Navigator program, which promotes energy efficiency in small multifamily buildings, we get $250,000 of funding for that from the city's budget per year, which in the context of multifamily building improvements is nothing, right? It's not a lot. So, you have to kind of act as a convener within that context and bring different partners together, create partnerships so that you can drive the kind of changes that you want to see in the absence of the direct financial resources that are going to drive the change more quickly. And workforce development was something that I kind of adopted as part of my work portfolio once I entered into the city, because I see that a lot of the improvements that are driven by IRA provisions or green financing, those go to people that already have capital assets, right? Those go to people that already have assets for them to improve their assets, make them more sustainable. That's incredibly important. but our society is built on a foundation of inequity. And there are a lot of people from a lot of different communities that have no assets, right? And will not be able to derive the benefits of those. There's a lot of people that don't own homes even, right? Like one of the more equitable parts of the Inflation Reduction Act is those tax credits that can go to homeowners. There's less and less people that can afford to own homes now. Right, so workforce development, getting people jobs in the new green economy that we're trying to create, that was where I identified, here's where we can make good equitable impacts. And, here's what we can create for community benefit plans that, a lot of federal grants are asking for, that we can't really create community benefits agreements or project labor agreements, these mechanisms that have existed but are not legal in Wisconsin necessarily. So we're supported in that through city leadership. A vibrant green economy is part of our sustainability plan. And in the programs that we do run, we do try to incorporate workforce development. We try to advocate for diverse contractors to do work in the buildings that we have. We've tried to do a lot of workforce development with our solar program, the Madison program. We have fleet apprenticeships, so that people that are working on our new electric bus fleet have the capacity to do, electric vehicle work in the future for that growing economy. We have the Green Power program, which promotes apprenticeships that help individuals that are interested in entering the solar industry install solar on city buildings. And then we have a partnership with a nonprofit called Operation Fresh Start that does a lot of apprenticeships related to green infrastructure, tree plantings, flood resilience and greenways, and planting native plants so that we have better flood resilience, things of that nature. But it's still really not enough. So the next thing that you can kind of do is you can kind of identify, and this is something that's important for people that are pursuing careers right now or looking for careers to enter. Pay attention to city plans, pay attention to funding opportunities, and pay attention to grants that are being put out by the federal government, because those often fund infrastructure. And where infrastructure is being developed, there are job opportunities available. I think I saw someone in the chat that is in the construction industry. If you pay attention to where grant money is going, you'll be able to identify potential opportunities for sustainable jobs in the construction industry. And promote that kind of stuff, and also identify areas where there's like electric vehicle infrastructure being created. Everything that is changing about our society is equivalent essentially to a job. So making sure that people are aware of that is super important. And then, more of the partnerships that I kind of wanted to talk about was a lot of the game of workforce development is often the purview of the federal and state government. City governments aren't often given a lot of funding for that. But where we do apply for funding from the federal government through the EPA and the Department of Energy, we've applied for the Energy Future Grant, which we received, which is going to give us more funding for that Efficiency Navigator program that I administer. And the department and the EPA, we recently applied for the Community Change Grant. We always include workforce development, and our ability to include workforce development in those applications is tied to our partnerships with nonprofits, which are a lot of the times what I imagine is the equivalent of the kind of programs that Dana runs in Atlanta, but nonprofits that exist here in Madison. And then the last thing that I kind of wanted to talk about was when we're developing these partnerships and comprehensive training programs. We're always keeping equity, right, and inclusion in the back of our mind. And the way that we're trying to accomplish that is, honestly, unemployment is kind of at a low point in our city right now. We're not at a high unemployment rate. And the reason is because, a lot of fast food restaurants, a lot of these kind of what you call low skilled jobs, oftentimes, but are definitely jobs that deserve to pay a living wage. I'm happy that people are getting paid living wages doing them. There are things that you need to pull people out of so that they can get into those more paying $45 to $65 an hour jobs, right? And to incent people to do that, you have to pay for them to participate in workforce development that's going to pay them wages. It's gonna pay for their education to some extent. You really got to incent them to do that. And that requires resources. So we're always looking for that. We're always looking for industry and workforce partnerships and funding that will kind of allow us to pull people from these jobs that they definitely deserve to get paid a living wage from, but kind of upskill them so that we have people from our own community that are able to enter into these infrastructure jobs that are emerging due to the Inflation Reduction Act and other climate action that's happening. So thank you, everybody. It was great to be able to talk about all that.
Thank you so much, Gabriel, and for all of our other speakers today, sharing a little bit about your background, as well as sharing advice for folks here in this session today. This brings us to our regularly scheduled panel discussion. We are at 6:58, so we are close to time. We will go over probably a few minutes because we do want to ask a couple questions, but we also want to save some time. And so I think I'm going to do that now, just so it doesn't get lost. This is something that we've been working on for some time now. And Evie, I don't know if you wanted to talk about it a little bit more, but we're currently working right now really to get out the vote in preparation for the upcoming election. And we have this resource that we'd like to share in the chat. A lot of what we say at Change a Chamber is that we can have conversations about these things all day, but if we're not taking action, we're not making progress. And so this is really something that we want to share out and sort of an action that comes out of this session here today. And Evie or Deb, I don't know if there was anything else you wanted to talk about as it relates to this before we get into the panel.
Yeah, I would just say that it's really crucial that we have a climate-friendly government. We've made a lot of progress, but if we end up with the next administration or Congress not being committed to climate solutions, we could lose the progress we've made and create a lot of damage. So that's why it's so important to get out the vote. And please utilize these resources any way you can with all of the networks that you have. And remember how important it is as we get toward the election. There's even a section on how to make sure your friends are voting, on how to go to your local campus. So please use them. Thank you. Evie, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so this page has a lot of information about checking your registration, registering to vote, but it also is geared towards college students because that's our primary audience. So you can find like state-specific information about voting and also what to do if you're on campus and you're living on campus. You can still vote even if you aren't at your primary residency that you may be at when you're not in school. You vote wherever you live at the time. So if you're new to voting or know people who are new to voting, maybe turning 18 soon or haven't voted before, please send them that page link also in the chat. It's changethechamber.org/GOTV. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Evie. And I actually see a question in the chat for those that haven't been seeing the chat. The chat has been exploding over the past couple minutes. And I'm actually going to talk about the last one I see, because I think it's a nice transition to some of the questions that we had prepared for our panelists. And so Abdul Baset said, I'm a graduate from electrical engineering department. How do I get involved in a green job? I have experience in solar energy. And so that's part of the question, but I think even broader, I'm really curious to hear from some of the panelists, what advice you might have for young people or anyone else for that matter who wants to transition into a green career.
I would recommend that younger folks partition their college credentials from opportunities in the green workforce. For a long time, I was thinking, well, I have 2 master's degrees, therefore I should have this kind of job. And it kind of like constrained my possibilities, and I passed up some good opportunities. So for Abdul Bashir, what I would do if I had the time, I'd go become a solar installer and learn about carpentry, electrical, and just energy, and just work my way through the program, and within a year or 3 become a supervisor if I wanted to. But those jobs are important, and that might be a way to get to leverage your engineering background but not be wed to it.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, absolutely. Dana.
Yeah, I would add, because you said solar, so I gotta put a little something in here. Those networks are critically important, you know, for now and in the future. So, of course, I'm gonna, you know, give a shout out to SEIA, Solar Energy Industries Association. You know, just making sure that you're getting out there and meeting people in the industry, and starting now, because you build a network, you know, over the next decade, it just keeps on paying you back. So beyond, you know, combing through opportunities, I would encourage that. And I would also encourage some reflection on, you know, why do you want a green career? So, you know, that can help you really frame, you know, where you're going. So you want that immediate next step, but then you want that vision. Is it because you want, you know, financial independence, or you want to be able to, you know, have a remote job and be more mobile, or because you want to work on international things, and start to map out your career in that way? Because one of the great things about solar is it is, um, you know, I'm going to say universal, right? Because it is outside of this universe as well, technically. But you know, it's certainly global. So many opportunities that you can really, you know, narrow that down, but expand your strategy.
Thank you so much for sharing, Dana. Deb or Gabriel, is there anything you want to add to this question, or any
But
thoughts?
I would say, you know, I'm not super into the renewable energy stuff that we do. I'm more of an energy efficiency person, and it's not something that people like to talk about a lot. But for an electrical engineer, there are so many emerging opportunities with the home energy rebates that are either for energy efficiency technologies or electrified technologies, right? And installing heat pumps, you know, creating more efficient electrical panels, and electrical, you know, just technology. That's such an important part of, you know, what needs to happen for us to transition to a more sustainable society. I would definitely look into kind of the energy efficiency industry and kind of emerging opportunities there if you have the chance.
Yeah, I agree with what Gabriel said. And I also just put something in the chat that you can look at. And Chris Nichols, who we're all honored to have you on tonight, also put something into the chat about career maps. But I think a lot of times you got to read about the different companies, decide what kind of company or organization. It might be a nonprofit, it might be a government that you want to work for. I have had students who walked in and said, I'm showing up every day. You can have me sweep the floors. I want to work for your company. And they actually did. One of them started out sweeping the floor and ended up running the clean lab for the manufacturing of the solar panels. So your enthusiasm, your assertiveness, always polite though, right? Matters. And also doing things to make yourself stick out. I had another student who used to send cards every few days to the HR department. You know, you will be so happy after you've hired me. And of course, I will be happy too. Also, just don't just look at the degree, look at your skills. And your skills include your attitude, your temperament. And we always give letters of recommendation, right? When we have great, we get pro bono volunteers who do a few hours a week, and then we get to know them. Utilize character references. I hate to tell you this, it is networking. But sometimes you can just do cold call too. I walked into the college after owning a solar company and I said, you need a program in this. And they said, oh, well, we were thinking about that. So hopefully that's useful. I could say a bunch of other stuff, but let's keep going. Tony, back to you.
Thank you so much, Deb. Another question that we were really curious to ask too, so transitioning away from advice that we might give to people who might be transitioning towards a green career, we're really curious to know from the panelists, what opportunities do you see that are being underutilized to help expand green jobs?
I can start out here, just to pick up on what I said very briefly about, you know, STEAM. You know, part of the challenge for the adoption of climate solutions and climate justice is just getting the word out. And so, we need those media people, we need those storytellers, we need those artists. And I'm not necessarily talking about, creating sculptures out of repurposed materials here, but, ways to really communicate more effectively. For instance, I'll go to kind of an expo, and, a lot of the technical folks will have their presentations up there. And I mean, it's how do you communicate a very complicated innovation in a way that the person that you want to buy it or adopt it can thoroughly understand it in less than 60 seconds. I mean, that's the point. So it's not enough just to create innovation or to do good climate work, but the word needs to be spread, and that's an art and a science in itself. So I would have to go with design and art, and of course I'm going to say entrepreneurship, because we need business leadership too.
I'd say that one underutilized resource is the corporate tax structure in the United States. In 1950, the corporate tax structure was 50%, and now it's down, as of 2020, it's down to 13%. So this isn't about, I mean, this is about who is generating wealth, where does the wealth go, and who is holding on to it. It's again that power concentration that I was talking about earlier. So if there's going to be advocacy for changing the chamber, we need to change the narrative about where is wealth and what is public wealth and what is private wealth.
Thank you both for sharing that.
I just gotta say,
Deb,
I love that. I love that so much. We have a new initiative at Change the Chamber called Beyond Anti-Capitalism. And it's about how do you build a sustainable economy, a caring and inclusive sustainable economy. So if people want to help work on that, let us know. Alec is here on the webinar, and he's one of the ones leading it, because people have a lot of dystopian visions. They've got a lot of gloom and doom visions. They do not know that many of the solutions that could get us to thriving communities, even in a somewhat climate unstable world, are here, but we've got to start implementing them now so we don't go into emergency mode. And it feels good. You can tell, ask any of the people who are involved in these organizations. It feels good when you're part of the solutions. So I would say that. The other thing is what's underutilized, not taking things to scale. So if you have done something, go find the national organization of people who do those kinds of things and go and present or write an article or ask to do a blog or a podcast or even, just an announcement in their newsletter. Take your stuff to scale so that you can have much greater impacts. My whole criteria for what new initiatives we take on has to do with what's going to have the greatest impacts, positive impacts. Thanks, Tony. Back to you.
Thank you, Deb. And Gabriel, is there anything that you wanted to say about that before we go to the next question?
I would just say, always, bear in mind that, local governments are a viable option when we're thinking about changing systems for connecting communities that have historically been disadvantaged to opportunities that are not traditionally, available to them. And I think a lot about, emerging opportunities and creating grid resilience, infrastructure, or things of that nature, where the traditional workforce is overwhelmingly white and male. And cities oftentimes have relationships with nonprofits and community organizations that can create narratives that will encourage youth to enter into those occupations that can be diversified and are very good occupations for creating, kind of bridging the wealth gap that exists in our society due to historical inequities.
Yeah, absolutely. That's super important to consider. And thank you all for sharing what your thoughts are on for opportunities for things that are being underutilized. I want to close. There's one last question, and then we'll also provide a little bit of space for anyone who might have questions. We'll go back through the chat to make sure we didn't miss anything. But kind of talking a little bit about what Deb was saying, transitioning away from that doom and gloom. So we've talked a lot about green careers and green jobs, and we talked about a little bit how difficult it is. But I'm really curious to hear what is your hope or your vision for the future for the green economy?
We only have like a minute for this. I think right now, we know what has to happen in our communities and in our planet to have more equity, more justice, more thriving. It's not that difficult. And I think we need to have the courage to have a double consciousness. On one hand, we need to be able to courageously critique the systems that are lying to us and withholding information and withholding resources. And then the other side of that gets to Deborah's point about the affirmation of what it is that we want. We need to create those narratives about what is a more beautiful and just world. And we need to live that. And it's difficult. But I think that it's not the kill the system and then not replace it. It's not just live in a utopian system without thinking about all the work that needs to get done. It's about this interplay of both and being at peace with the discord.
I can follow up on what Mayor SHERIF was talking about, and I appreciate Mayor, you bringing up some of these supremacist structures that we are forced to operate within. So when I picture moving forward and past that, it would be more of an equitable society that, customers, employees, and businesses really understand the value of equity and incorporating those into their business models, products, and services. So we're not bifurcating it into, some tax evasion strategy, the philanthropic industrial complex, but we're actually creating systems that address the harms from the beginning. And, that extends to, more equitable hiring, obviously, closed loop systems where we're not creating, single use products. And of course, I'm talking about the energy system as well. But one thing that I'll finish to say is, the best thing about sustainability is, it can apply to everything. And so, I agree that we need to be a little bit more creative in thinking about, more than just these dystopia dramas. And that begins with supporting youth like you guys tuning in, because, I never want to be one of those, veterans in this industry that feels like we have it all figured out. So I'm encouraged about, the fact that we have leaders. I love Gen Z because you all are just not afraid to let it rip. And we need more of that. We need more speaking truth to power. I will preface that with saying we all have power.
Thank you so much for sharing, Dana and Gamal. Deborah or Gabriel, would you like to share?
Yeah, I think that, something that I've been thinking about a lot is, I've been trained in identifying the optimality that can exist within different systems, right? From an economic perspective, but also considering, public policy considerations. And the conclusion that I often come to is that there needs to be so much more work done on creating enthusiasm and a sense that these changes that we're trying to create in the economy are not just the result of kind of the white environmentalism that has existed or of just extreme anxiety to the climate dystopia that could very well become a reality, but rather a commitment to each other like Deborah was talking about earlier on. But that, it's not only like a commitment to one another in that way, but just, a changing of culture, the creation of enthusiasm, songs, art, these different things that can kind of bring people together and make them think that the systems that we're creating, the technologies that we're developing, and the policies that we're creating will take care of them. And I think that that is such a, I feel like that's where almost the most work needs to be done. I feel like there's a lot of technology, a lot of policies, a lot of mechanisms to make the change that we need to have happen. But I think that there's just this, you know, this need to create the will to make it happen in our society.
So I spent 12 years teaching a course on positive scenarios for the future. And we would take students from economics classes, psychology classes, political science, etc. And we would put them in small interdisciplinary groups and say, create a positive scenario for the future. And then tell us the story using the concepts you're learning in class of how we got from today to this positive future. And we had all sorts of students who normally would have, you know, our retention rates went through the roof. People weren't dropping out of classes. They were really excited to come. And I will tell you that after we did this for all these years, all the positive scenarios look the same. I actually think there may be some collective unconscious going on around a vision for the future. I mean, if you just look at it, what, you know, clean air and water, yeah, we want that, right? Not being anxious that you'll starve to death as a senior citizen, yeah, we want that, right? I mean, there are a number of things that we all want. And then it's just figuring out how to prioritize it, how to structure it, how to get off of the, you know, just some of the dysfunctional parts of our economic system and help them become healthier with policies. But we need to be able to advocate for those policies, because if we don't show up, then special interests who are making money off of us and not caring about us as workers or consumers, etc., they'll show up and they'll control it. So I'm very excited about our Beyond Anti-Capitalism initiative at Change the Chamber. Come on back and visit and see what we're doing or even contribute to it. But I got to tell you, I found that the other panel members tonight were very articulate. I will also tell you that I spent some time living in communes, and sometimes if things are provided to people, they might lose motivation. So building in some incentive systems and motivation systems, I think is also healthy. But we need a lot more structuring of being a caring and compassionate society and world. And if you've never read Schumacher's Economics as if People and the Planet Mattered, I think that phrase has a lot to say. And other living beings, of course. And, you know, take our change maker training, because we get into this stuff too and help you create your own personal vision as a change maker and support you in that.
Thank you for sharing that, Deb. That's the end of really our pre-prepared questions. But hearing all of your responses in the conversations today really gives me hope, you know, because, you know, when I am feeling the doom and gloom, it's often when I'm alone or, you know, I'm late, it's late at night, I'm in bed, you know, whatever. But when I'm in these spaces with everyone else, that gives me hope. And so just being here with you all is really powerful. And I just wanted to mention that. It looks like we have a couple of questions in the chat. I think, Deb, Evie, how do we want to go about answering these? I know we're a few minutes over.
I don't know what questions you're talking about, so
Okay.
I think
yeah, it
we've
looks like there.
Yeah, maybe not. Pull them
Yeah, it
out.
looks like there's one that you put in the chat, basically asking how to structure community input for mayors' offices who are planning and setting objectives, like how to involve the community. Is there any advice around that?
Oh my, yeah, there's all sorts of stuff out there on community engagement and how to do it well. I would say you might want to just take a look at that toolkit that I listed from the Clean Energy Ministerials as a starting place, but then just look up community engagement. There's a, you know, academic stream of literature on it. We listed for you, once again, thank you, Chris. You know, there's a whole bunch of resources in this chat. And so you can go to any of those organizations and look up community engagement as well. You want to give people a chance for their voices to be heard. You want to do it in a structured way so it doesn't slow down the process for such a long time that nothing gets done. And create early wins, but you have to manage the emotional climate. I think we all need to do in all of our organizations skill buildings around conflict resolution and emotional intelligence, so that we can be as functional with each other as possible and build healthy communities along the way. That's my 2 cents, but I want to hear what the others have to say.
Well, I mean, I guess if anybody is curious about how community engagement happens in practice in local government, you can shoot me an email. To the short version of how we developed our climate resilience or our climate action plan, which we call the sustainability plan, because sustainability is kind of like the proactive concept where we're not being reactive to climate. At least in Madison for our purposes. Was to create like different kind of categories of people within business, people within the nonprofit world, you know, just active citizens, active community leaders, the political leaders. We have like 20 alders. So kind of break down what different groups we need to receive input from. And then we also included our city staff in that as well. City staff are they hold an incredible wealth of, you know, administrative knowledge that is very essential to incorporate into plans, that you will not be aware of if you do not if you don't consult them prior to creating your plan. So we kind of just broke it down like that, and we had focus groups. The sustainability manager for the city is a very accomplished facilitator. And we also had facilitators from a consulting group that we had kind of help us put together all of the data from our feedback sessions together, and that eventually became the sustainability plan. So it was totally driven by the different stakeholder groups within our community that were prodded by very skilled facilitators and getting the answers that we needed from them so that we could develop policies that were amenable to everybody's perspectives and kind of balance everyone's, you know, needs.
Thank you so much for sharing, Gabriel. Yeah, the facilitation is really important, being able to navigate and include all of the different voices in the conversation. I think with that, we're gonna come to a close, but I want to thank you all again for joining us here today. I want to thank our speakers. I want to thank the other climate fellows who have helped to organize this, send out the invites, put together the documents. This is largely youth-led with help from our mentors, Deb, and then also Priscilla. Is there any other closing words, Deb or Evie, that you want to mention for folks?
A big thank you to all of those who made this happen, but an even bigger thank you to those of you who are going to take this information and help us create a more sustainable future. Congratulations.
Thank you, everyone. It's a lot of good conversations and good information and resources shared. So I'm glad we can make this happen.
Perfect. Awesome. Bye, everyone. Have a great week.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.